Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Myers. I'm the director of the Berks Alliance. We want to thank you for joining us today. We think we've been hearing for a long time people wanting to know more about how local government works in Pennsylvania and Berks County and why there are so many, what do they do, and what's different about them. We're going to ask you to leave your camera on, but mute your microphone while the program's going on so we don't get a lot of background noise. I'm going to now turn it over to John Weidenhammer for a brief introduction, and then I'll come back.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining our call. I want to thank Dave and our presenters for putting together what I think is going to be an extraordinarily informative program today. We're going to be talking about local government and how it works. And I think someone once said that there's magic and mystery, and often there's a lot of mystery around how our matrix of government in Berks County and the world tends to work, or some people believe not work as harmoniously as it should. But we'll hear about some of the complexities regarding that today. So we're thrilled that you can join us. For those of you that are new to these Berks Alliance broadcasts, the Berks Alliance is really a community development organization that's focused on trying to bring information regarding critical information about our community, but we're also focused on trying to improve the health, wealth, and education attainment of the community of Berks County. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dave. And again, thanks to Dave for organizing this, and thanks to our presenters as well.
Yes, thank you, John. Let me cover quickly some ground rules here. As I mentioned, we do ask you to mute your microphone, but leave your cameras on so we can see we're dealing with live people. You'll see at the bottom of the screen a chat function. We're going to ask you to submit questions and comments there. We'll get to those near the end of the program. We do record the program, and we send a copy of the recording to everybody who registers for the program. We have more people registering than will actually participate in the program. So we end up getting a lot more people having access to it. We also put it on the Berks Alliance website, and we share it with our friends at BCTV. I was also asked to do a brief commercial here, and I'll go to this quick announcement. The Imagine Berks County Strategic Plan has a working group dealing with housing issues, and they are doing a program on October 3rd at Penn State Berks from 8 to 12 o'clock. I will send a copy of that invitation to everybody, but just so you have that. But it's a discussion about what boroughs can do to create incentives to increase the housing stock in Berks County. So with that, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Paul Jansen, the director of the Center for Local Government Excellence at Albright College. Paul, to you.
Well, Dave, I have to take exception about that being an honor, but that's okay. Thank you very much. So we have a panel of officials here that are from different parts of government, and some even cover a couple forms of government. So Kevin Barnhart, who's the CEO for Berks County, is on the panel today. He also was a county commissioner. And most people probably also remember that he was also the mayor of West Reading. And so he's gone through the various levels of local government. So I'm very excited that he's here today. We also have Fred Levering, who is the mayor of Wyomissing Borough. And Fred is probably the longest existing official to have been engaged and working with the Center for Excellence in Local Government at Albright College. So Fred, it's good that you're here also. Thank you very much. We are anticipating that Mike Melanowski is going to get on the panel. He's the president of the Board of Commissioners for Muhlenberg Township, which is a first-class township. And we'll get into that mystical local government as we go here. So the final panelist that we have is Chip Pilger, who is the chairman of the Board of Supervisors of Lower Heidelberg Township, which is a second-class township. He also is the chairman of the Community Advisory Board, which is the governing board for the Center for Excellence in Local Government. Chip also served as a commissioner in a first-class township, which was Coonroo Township. So if Mike is conflicted and can't get on today, Chip, I'll lean on you to answer some of the questions having to do with first class townships.
Paul,
So-
I'm
Mike's
here.
on the call, Paul.
Oh, great, there you are. Okay, welcome,
Great.
Mike. Glad to see you. Okay.
And Paul, let me jump back in for one quick second. I have to do a quick apology here. We had hoped to have English Bradley, who's the chief of staff for the mayor of the city of Reading on, but she's not able to join us today, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, David. So to understand the history of local government in Pennsylvania, we have to go back to when the Commonwealth was formed, the country was laid out, and even before that, when we were a part of the United Kingdom and the Empire of England. So the Commonwealth was laid out in 1681 by King Charles. And so he's the one who kind of laid out where we were. It was all based on, we all know William Penn, but he's the guy that actually said, okay, this is going to be an area and it's going to be the Charter of Pennsylvania. Of course, Pennsylvania then signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th of 76. And in the very same day, Berks County was formed as an actual county in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We were the second state to ratify the Constitution after Delaware. And so we've been there for the whole run. And that's an interesting, it's going to be an interesting issue as we develop the story of why local government in Pennsylvania is so unique, or local government in the Northeast is so unique. So Berks County was formally founded in 1742, which of course is a good 22 years ahead of the actual Declaration of Independence. And we'll celebrate 250 years as a county the same time that Pennsylvania celebrates as a state, and the United States celebrates its independence in 2026, 250 years. The city of Reading was founded in 1748, likewise, even 4 years before the county was founded, and celebrated its 250th itself in 2023. So that was 2 years ago. Some of you may have read or seen that they had representatives from Germany and England, which were two of their sister cities from Europe, into the county to help them celebrate their 250 years. The balance of the county was laid out as unincorporated areas. So that's an anomaly, I think, that people don't recognize. A lot of people don't recognize that, you know, it was the wilderness back in 1776. There was Pennsylvania, there was Philadelphia and the areas around Philadelphia, which Berks County was a big part of that. But the rest of the state really was kind of wilderness. So following the creation of Berks County and the city of Reading, the county began a long process of formally creating governments. The Commonwealth created what is called political subdivisions. So when you hear the term political subdivision, what that means is that the state of Pennsylvania has a constitution, and they delegate responsibilities to what they call political subdivisions. And we're going to go through the various kinds of subdivisions that exist in Berks County to go through this program. But we are permitted as local governments to do things that the state allows us to do, and also things that don't conflict with what the state wants, what the state has passed as far as laws go. This is unusual in New England, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but that's how government works in Pennsylvania. As Berks moved into the 1800s, most of the county was laid out in townships, but there was the city of Reading. And so as the county was laid out, there was only one form of townships, and that's, you know, it was only called townships, and that stayed that way for a long time. But, you know, Berks was really an agrarian county. A lot of farming was here, but slowly we began to get industry. And so Berks began to have formal industry, and services were demanded. And this led to the Commonwealth creating another form of government, which was boroughs. So we had cities, and then we developed classes of cities. So there was the city of Philadelphia, which is a class 1 city. It's the only class 1 city in Pennsylvania. We have Pittsburgh, which is a class 2 city. And then you have third classes. And I think Allentown there's another city that is a 2A city. So it's like Pittsburgh, but it's not a third class city, which is what Reading is. So there are 3 classes of cities in Pennsylvania. and we had townships, and that's all we had. So when these industries started forming in these historically farming communities, they would come in and say, we need police, or we need fire, or we need street lights, or whatever it is. And at that time it was gas lights, but they would come in for services, and the farmers who basically ran these areas were like, we don't need that. We are farmers. And so we ran into a lot of problems in Pennsylvania with areas that had needs for services, but didn't want to be third-class cities. So Pennsylvania created the form of government known as boroughs. So at this point, we have three forms of layers of government. Thank you. We have townships, we have cities, and now we have boroughs. And that's the way it stood for a good period of time. And so people would grow in what they were doing. And back then, if you were a borough, you could annex property from townships. And so if you were the city of Reading, you could annex properties from townships. And this is way back in the 1800s into the 1900s and all the way up into 1967. However, that practice has ended. And so what the Commonwealth did was they started to respond to the fact that cities were annexing properties from townships around them, and then boroughs were being formed to stop that further annexation, and then the boroughs were annexing property from townships around them. And so in the 30s, the state created the second form of townships, and it created what they called the first class form of township government. And that government was formed for a lot of reasons. People didn't want to become cities. They didn't want to be boroughs. So they formed this township format, and it gave powers very similar like cities and boroughs. But most significantly, the reason why first-class townships were created was because they could stop boroughs and cities from annexing property. We already know that cities can't annex borough property and boroughs can't annex cities' properties, but first-class townships can stop boroughs or cities from annexing property from them. And we know that locally because you've got Cumru Township, which is adjacent to the city, and you've got Muhlenberg Township, which is adjacent to the city. And the only other first-class township in the county is around the Colebrookdale, which surrounds a borough. And so they wanted to stop the borough from taking property from them, so they became a first-class township. So that was the end of the development of government in Pennsylvania until home rule became an alternative. And that's the form that the city of Reading has right now. They are a home rule third-class city. So they have certain sections of their government that are very similar, but the Commonwealth created the home rule form of government so that municipalities could create their own form of government as long as they stayed in line with the basic codes that the Commonwealth required them to have. The smallest city in Pennsylvania is Parker. It only has 676 residents. And the reason why you could become a city was because you had a certain density. Well, as we all know, there's a lot of cities in Pennsylvania that are basically shells of what they used to be because the industry left or whatever. So we have a city in Pennsylvania, which is Parker, with only 676 residents. We also have a county in Pennsylvania that has barely more than 5,000 people in the entire county. So that's what's left over of where we are. So one of the major problems in local government was annexation, and the state did a new constitution in 1965, and it took them 2 years to go through it. They could not agree on how they were going to allow for annexation. So they adopted the new constitution for the Commonwealth and left annexation out. The reason why this is significant is because if you look around the country, what you see is once you get out of New England, you see that cities basically grow out of their borders and they annex additional properties from the county, and then they grow. And I'll never forget in 2000, the city of Phoenix passed Philadelphia as the fifth largest population in the country. And they showed the Phoenix in 1950, which was the first census that they participated in the United States. And the entire city of Phoenix fit in the area that is currently the Philadelphia International Airport. It had a population of like 10,000 people. And in 2000, it overtook Philadelphia with a population of 1.6 million. And it was 3 times the size of Philadelphia. It had grown so much. So when you look out at cities like Atlanta or Charlotte or Los Angeles or Phoenix, what you see is that services were created in the cores. People kept growing and growing, and so they kept adding area to the cities by annexation. And so they had these homogeneous areas that function. In Pennsylvania, we stopped that in 1967. And we probably have a lot of callers on this phone call right now that know that how much this state has changed from 1967 to today. And that has created a lot of problems for us. So the other big story about local government in Pennsylvania and in New England is that when you're in the northeast section of the country, when we declared independence, we had a lot more urban areas. And so they also had a lot more interrelationships with Britain. And of course, we didn't like the British form of government. So in Pennsylvania and in almost all of the northeastern states, especially the ones that declared independence in 76, they created this very focused local form of government. And so in Pennsylvania, we separated the courts from local government. So you have police departments, local police departments, or you have the state police, and you have county courts. That was a direct reaction to England, where they had the courts and the sheriff were the same people. So they could point at people, arrest them, and put them in jail. And there was no separation in that power. So we put all of our focus on local governments, and the county governments took care of other parts of the services that we had. What happened was, by the time we got the Louisiana Purchase, it was 1812, and we had beat the British twice at that point for the Revolutionary War in 1812. And so as we moved further out and we moved further south, they didn't really care about English form of government. So elsewhere in the country, with the exception of Illinois, when you go from Pennsylvania all the way up to Northeast and you go out to Ohio and jump Indiana, their form of local government is very similar to Pennsylvania's. It's all focused on the lowest level of government. Illinois has more local governments than Pennsylvania does, and it's the only state in the Northeast that has that. So elsewhere in the country, you have counties that then allowed for population centers to form cities, and the cities then grew and provided the services. That's not the case in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, local governments provide the local services, roads. We provide parks, provide all the basic essentials that you have. But the counties has a different form there. They handle the courts, they handle planning, they handle prisons, and they handle social services. So with that, that's the beginning of why our local government is so unusual. But when you go to other states, you basically usually only have the county and cities. And so the county provides services where the cities are not incorporated. So in 1967, annexation stopped. All of our third-class cities, all of our communities that were developed and frozen in time in 67, they were basically just stuck in their landmass and how they could use their properties. And of course, in Pennsylvania, a lot of our cities were fully developed by 1960. And so they're dealing with today the issues that were present in their communities in 1960. So, Kevin, you've been a local government official, a county commissioner, and now the chief operating officer for Berks. Would you discuss the 4 major areas of county service?
Sure, but good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Paul, and the staff, and of course the visitors, the viewers today. I'd like to say that the county is the mortar between the bricks. We seem to pick up all the things that the townships and the boroughs are not doing, which is again the diversification of our government here. Pennsylvania has 67 counties. We are a third-class county. That's certainly based on population numbers. For example, Philadelphia is a first-class county, Allegheny second, and so on. There are 8 different classes of counties. We are ranging in the millions to, as Paul pointed out earlier, a county with about 5,000 population. Our county structure actually encompasses 45 different departments. We are a very large conglomerate. huge social service provider to the community. Some of those major issues are the courts, which is a separate function of county government. There's a separation between us and the courts. And we find that very often when people call and have a concern with children and youth services, and they have a case in front of the courts, and they say, well, you hire the CYS caseworkers. Yes, that is true. But if your case is in front of the courts, we are completely hands off. We can't do anything when someone's case is in front of the courts. So we fund the courts because the state in their infinite wisdom has decided that the county should bear the brunt of paying for the majority of the court system, the Commonwealth court system. We are required as a county to provide a jail, sometimes interactive, you can call it a jail or a prison, but predominantly jails are short terms, less than 2 years, and prisons are 2 years or longer. We have a planning division which works with our townships and boroughs in the city as an advisor to those other planning divisions in the county. We have a very extensive park system. Not a requirement. It's a nice to do for the county, but we feel it's certainly something that's necessary and vital to the vibrancy of our community, as well as libraries. We do not own the libraries. We are a federated system. The other entities do own and operate the libraries, but we provide support services. And the big nut for us is social services. Human services fall into mental health, children and youth services. We also provide services through domestic relations, area agency on aging. And again, we have the Berks, which is a fabulous institution, 420 bed capacity, largest nursing home in the county. That's not a requirement, but something we strongly believe in and want to provide that service for folks here in our community. We also provide funding for Veterans Affairs, public defenders, election services, another requirement of county government to provide free and fair elections throughout the county, and emergency services, that another entity that kind of encompasses other local police, fire, and emergency services. We have the umbrella organization under emergency services. So very complex conglomerate. We're one of the largest employers in the county, and we provide services 24/7, 365. That's all for now.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. The next part of this discussion was going to be about the city of Reading, and I'm just going to kind of fill in what English may or may not have said, and please don't hold me to the brief explanation I'm going to give. But obviously, the city of Reading is the largest municipality in Berks County. It's also the fourth largest city in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it provides all the services. It has police, EMS, fire, public works, parks and recreation, sewer. Used to have water, but they spun that off to the Reading Area Water Authority. So in terms of municipalities that provide services, they're probably at the very top. CELG is doing a big study on EMS services right now. And the city of Reading is one of very few municipalities in the Commonwealth. And there's 2,500 municipalities. One of the very few in the Commonwealth that actually funds 100% of their EMS operation. And so when you call the city for an ambulance, that's going to be a city employee that responds. Elsewhere in the county, it could be a hospital employee with Tower Direct, or it could be Lifeline, which is with St. Joe's, or it could be a nonprofit ambulance operation. So the city is operated by a home rule charter. There are probably people on this call that remember when the city it's a standard third-class city, and it had a commission form of government. And we're going to talk a little bit about commission form because first-class townships have that same format of government. But what that meant is that each city council person handled a certain part of the actual operations of the city operation. And they got away from that, and they went to what we now call a strong mayor council form of government. And the mayor basically presents the budget, but council has to approve it. And then he acts as the cheerleader for the city. He manages the services, and he implements policies and programs to respond to issues for the city. So I think English would have probably answered a little bit more than that, but I don't want to step on anybody's toes and say things that may be there. I think that's pretty accurate for what the city of Reading does. Mike Malinowski is president of the Board of Commissioners. Mike, can you explain the commission form of government from your perspective in Muhlenberg Township, and discuss the terms of commissioners and how many commissioners serve a first-class township?
Sure. Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, I guess it is now, to everyone. I'll try to be short and sweet. For First Class Township, just to give you a little quick background for mine, I think this is my 22nd year on the board of Muhlenberg Township, so hopefully I know a little bit about First Class Townships at this point. Within a First Class Township, Paul mentioned, it kind of operates like a little city. We have 5 elected commissioners. They run, you have a 4-year term. How that works is there's 2 commissioners up one election cycle. Then after a year off, there's 3 commissioners up the next election cycle. So that's how it works. It's not by party. There are some, I don't think many in the state that you could do it based on the First Class Township Code by precinct. However, the majority of them are at large. I'm not sure, Paul, if any in this Commonwealth do it by precinct, but I don't think that's relevant anymore. But we provide all the basic services. I mean, a First Class Township Code basically is classified as 300 inhabitants within 1 square mile. That's if you look at the First Class Township Code, that's how it's defined. But we do it all. I always say. I mean, and when you look at a First Class Township, we're really only 10% of your tax bill. So we always like to put a dollar bill out, and you cut it up in 3 different ways that you're taxed. That being your school taxes are your largest, your county taxes, sorry, Kevin, are the ones in between, and then your township taxes are usually the lowest amount. And we always say you get a lot for that lowest amount. You get police and fire coverage, we plow your roads, we pick up your leaves, we contract for your trash. We do a lot of things as a First Class Township. As does Second Class Township and Borough. So there's a lot of activity that gets done for a little amount of funding compared to the other taxing bodies. So I think the decisions sometimes we impact people's lives probably a little more directly because we are interacting with them on a day-to-day basis. And believe me, they don't call you up and tell you you're doing a great job sometimes if you all went to a township meeting, but sometimes that's the fun of it, because you can really help out your community and get involved with your residents, because you can impact the stuff that they need on a day-to-day basis. It's challenging because we do get a lot of mandates that are given to us that we have to then fund. It makes it, tough decisions on where you want to invest those tax dollars. And I'm sure Kevin and Chip, and anyone else who's been on board, we can do everything that you want us to do. It's how much do you want to pay for it and how much you want to be taxed for it. So those are kind of the way it's built in Pennsylvania from a First Class Township perspective. I think we have 3 very good ones in Berks County with Cumru Township and with Colebrookdale. But I'll be happy to answer any questions that we have. But the best way to reiterate it is we are just basically run almost like a little city. It's just a little different form of government. So hopefully, Paul, that's a good overview at a very high level of what a First Class Township does.
So it's a good insight into the difference of local government. I want to tell just a quick story. I'm at Albright College. And so we used to have a political science professor here, who believed that federal government was the only level of government that mattered in the country. And, states and local government were nothing. And I said, well, that's interesting. When you call the police, do you have the FBI come, or do you have a local cop or a state cop come? When you leave your driveway, are you on a state highway, or do you leave on a local road? And when you need your road plowed, who plows it? When you go take a walk and you want to go to a park, chances are that's a county park or a local park. I said, yeah, you may think that the federal government is the only level of government, but the point that the level of government that impacts you the most is local government. And I include the county and local government because it really is a local level of government. So enough of that. Let's turn to Fred. Fred, you've been a councilman, longtime councilman for the borough where I'm missing, and now you're also the mayor there. Can you explain the main roles of the mayor in a borough and what that means? And tell us a little bit about your history, because you're a long-standing elected official.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'd like to follow up on what Paul was just saying. And as far as the levels of government, I mean, people really don't know much other than what they see on TV as to what goes on in Washington or even Harrisburg, but they know where we as municipal people live. And we're the ones that are, as I've always said, within nose punching distance of the public. So we are involved, as Mike well pointed out, in providing a lot of services. And of that tax bill that Mike was referring to, it's about 70% of it is school taxes, about 20% county, and that leaves about 10% for what we do as municipalities. In a borough, in Wyomissing, we have 7 members of council. There's 1 mayor. The mayor is responsible for overseeing the police department. I would break a tie if there was a vote of council that ended in a tie. Can also veto a borough ordinance if I have a problem with it or whatever. Those things happen very, very rarely. As borough officials, we are in constant contact with each other, and there's not a lot of times that there are controversies, but occasionally. We also have the responsibility as a mayor for declaring an emergency. Emergencies are generally weather-related things, but occasionally, as happened in West Reading a couple years ago with that Palmer candy factory explosion, the mayor in West Reading declared an emergency because of those special circumstances. And when I think about Wyomissing Borough, I mean, the routes 422 and 222 intersect in the borough, and the main east-west rail line for Norfolk Southern is that line that goes up parallel to Penn Avenue. Now, there's potential for trouble. Fortunately, we haven't had it, but those are things that we take very seriously. So the borough provides the services starting out with public safety. It's the fire and police stuff that consumes a lot of our attention. And our responsibility as a municipality is making sure that the residences have a good place to live and raise their families. We also have come to understand that while people think of Wyomissing as a place of residences along tree-lined streets, it's the commercial stuff that pays the bills. We have sources of income in terms of our share of the earned income tax, their mercantile taxes, and the real estate tax. So we have to juggle those things and provide the services, but keeping it affordable. We've had a couple of conversations here about the different services that boroughs and municipalities provide, but some of them are provided in conjunction with others. We, in Wyomissing, for instance, own the water facilities. We are part of the consolidation of Wyomissing, Shillington, and West Reading boroughs and establishing the Western Berks Water Authority that Chip chairs and is going to discuss with you. We also are part of a sewer authority that, along with West Reading, that services a couple of surrounding areas as well. So it's all about services and making it affordable, Paul.
Excellent. Thanks, Fred. So, Chip, Fred referred to you. You've been both a commissioner in a first-class township, which was Kumru, and now you live in Lower Heidelberg. And so you've been elected to the Board of Supervisors, and this year you serve as chairman for the Board of Supervisors of Lower Heidelberg Township. You have 3 supervisors to discuss how the Sunshine Act affects how you govern. And let's discuss code laws. The code allows elected officials to serve as employees, except as managers. You want to talk about that, Chip?
Sure. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss this important topic. Second-class townships are unique. It can be 3 or 5, and in Lower Heidelberg, we're a board of 3. Once again, it limits us. I can't pick up the phone and call a fellow supervisor. because that would be a violation of the sunshine law. In Mike's situation in Muhlenberg, he can talk to two of the people, but once again, you can't have a quorum where it creates an issue with the sunshine law. So it makes it very difficult for us to do business and talks amongst ourselves without talking to the manager. Very similar to what Kevin deals with at the county. The three commissioners in the county can't talk to each other. They go through Kevin. So Kevin's like a revolving door, and we use our manager in the same way in our township. Now, once again, the difference is when you look at second-class townships or townships, without a doubt, it covers 95% of the land in Pennsylvania are townships. And it's diverse. So for example, you could have a township that has 200 residents, or you could have a township that has 600 residents. So you talk about some rural townships, second-class townships in Berks County. There are some that, maybe you're a supervisor, but you're also the road foreman, as Paul had mentioned, so you can work for the township. Typically, they might have a manager or might have a part-time secretary. So you go from a second-class township that once again, we provide a full amount of services, just like Muhlenberg and Kumru do, police, fire. We have our own zoning, our own boards on development. So once again, it depends on what township we are. Now, Lower Heidelberg, for example, is pretty much residential, but also agricultural. So really, you have to look at the makeup of the township and understand the challenges that we have, depending on where you are and what type of township you are. Real quickly then, talking about the authorities, once again, we all deal with authorities. Typically, even the city of Reading runs their wastewater plant, but RAWA runs the water side as an authority. So those authorities, once again, are separate from their local municipalities. Typically, they are appointed boards that run those. And as Fred mentioned, some of those authorities serve multiple municipalities. So we, for example, the Western Berks Water serves 9 different municipalities. So if I do the numbers on my fingers and toes, I think there's like 49 or 50 elected officials that I report to on the townships and boroughs I serve through the water authority. So you talk about that on top of managing the townships, the boroughs. You then have the layer of authorities out there that typically are once again providing water sewer service. They could be the parking authority in the case of the city of Reading. There's been talk about an emergency management authority providing ambulance services. There are many opportunities there to talk about that. Bringing it back into full circle, the county, once again, through the support of the commissioners, have been actively supporting financially and with all their might about the intergovernmental cooperation discussion through the Center for Excellence Local Government. We have multiple townships and boroughs that have agreements in place to work amongst themselves. To think that a borough or a township, small or large, can do this on their own is absolutely, if you're thinking you're going to do it on your own, you might as well forget it. So we have multiple people out there that are relying on other authorities, townships, boroughs to help us do the job, provide a better level of service, hopefully at a reduced cost. So that's what the center is all about. It's about, you talk about the couple words, intergovernmental cooperation. It happens at the city, happens at the city area water authority, and it happens all over the county. The commissioners financially are supporting that through dues. And I think Paul is going to tell you, we've got all but one municipality in Berks County that are members of the center, and they're half in the county, half out of the county. So the good news is all the different forms of government in the county are working together through Paul and the Center for Excellence Local Government.
Thank you, Chip. I just saw in the chat, Linda Kelleher is in the meeting. I hate to call you on the, call you out, Linda, but I would love it if you want to take a swing at some of the interesting aspect of the city government that we have. Can you do that, Linda? If you don't want to, that's fine. We'll move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul. I'm really not prepared to do that.
Okay, no problem. All right, Kevin, in terms of taxes, Linda, I appreciate that. Kevin, in terms of taxes, what's the primary revenue source for taxpayers in Berks County? We mentioned the county manages most of social services and direct operations and contracted services, but where does most of the money come from?
Thank you, Paul. The 20% that was alluded to earlier is the real estate tax bill that you receive with your township bill in March of every year. That's the main driver of some of the money that the county receives. I'll start at the top. The budget is for this year is $651 million. $651 million. Of that, the portion that is from the county taxpayers, 165 million, which is about 27%. The bulk of it is grants from the federal and state government. That's to provide the fuel, the revenue for the human services aspect of county government. So the process is the federal government gives money to the state, and then it becomes state money, and the state allocates or portions that money out to the counties. In particular, during COVID, the first tranche of money, the COVID relief money, we were under 500,000 population. So the federal government gave counties the size of Lancaster and larger direct allocations of COVID relief money. We had to get our siphoned through the state, and I don't think we received our fair share, but we couldn't say much about it. But then the second tranche of money, the second round of money actually came directly to the county. So we are a subset of state government. So we do a lot of services on behalf of the state. As I mentioned earlier, mental health, area agency on aging, and those CYS are run up through the state government down to the county, and we abide by the rules and regulations promulgated either by the state or federal government. Some of the breakdown of the money, capital in our total budget is 4%. Interfund transfer is about 7%. Personnel is a big one at 29%. And the operating budget of all that is about 60%. Broken down even further for if you're numbers people, public safety is 12%. That consumes the jail, the sheriff, the district attorney. Emergency services only 3%. Berks is 10%. Debt service is only 2%. Culture recreation, as we mentioned earlier, parks and recreation is 2%. Economic development is 7%. Human services, 38%. And judiciary is 10%. So it is a real pie that's divided amongst many of the components of county government. So yes, there's a lot of moving parts here in county government. But the bulk, again, is state and federal grants to provide money for human services.
I think it's interesting, Kevin, that, here we are in the year 2024, and counties only have property taxes. There's no other area. You move outside of the Northeast, outside of Pennsylvania, there's sales taxes, there's all kinds of income taxes, and they're afforded to all the political subdivisions in those states. Just to focus a little bit on the difference of Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Let me just say one thing that people say, and it kind of bristles me a little bit. The jail itself, the cost of the jail is all from county real estate, not state or federal funded. $50 million, 50, out of that 165. And people say, well, it's a profit. You're in it for the profit. I mean, really? County government wants to run a $50 million jail for a profit motive? We'd love not to have a jail, but it's a necessary component of county government, and it's one of the biggest number that we face. Follow closely behind the courts. I think the courts are in the $40 million range to operate the court system. So sorry about that. I get off my soapbox now.
Not a problem. So one of the things I like to highlight is in terms of what makes Pennsylvania different. I think I mentioned earlier, there's 2,500 local governments in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If we go to the state of Florida, and there's 12 million people. If we go to the state of Florida, there's 16 million people. There's 62 counties in Pennsylvania. In Florida, there's 61 counties. Guess how many local governments there are in Florida? There's 400 local governments. So serving 4 million more people than Pennsylvania, there's 2,000 more governments in Pennsylvania than in Florida. And that's pretty receptive in terms of the number of governments versus the population across the country. That's just the way it is. And so we have this redundancy. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic we want to talk about. Mike, you're the president of EHD, a major company in Pennsylvania managing insurance packages for municipalities and counties. many citizens may not recognize some of the kinds of insurance which municipalities need or are required to have, but we're a form of business operation, even though it's classified as a not-for-profit business. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mike?
Sure. I guess, because every municipality is a little unique from an insurance perspective. As Chip mentioned, authorities are a whole different level. But yeah, it's just another cost when, sometimes mass scales, the law of large numbers. If we had less, you'd probably have less of an insurance cost or risk management cost associated with it. But it's a unique marketplace. Unlike with your own auto and homeowners insurance, when you go out and get quotes from Geico, State Farm, Allstate, there's not people beating the door down for local government business. Obviously, police and fire, public works folks are very, very tough to insure, and there's not a lot of insurance companies going in. And the insurance marketplace right now, you're probably seeing it in your own auto and homes, is a bit of a mess right now with property values. And Pennsylvania costs have really skyrocketed because of what we call social inflation. As you know, we're a very litigious state. It's a very easy target to, go after local government. We are protected by a law in Pennsylvania called the Pennsylvania Tort Claims Act that can minimize the impacts of certain losses to your local municipality. Unfortunately, some of our folks in state government are trying to up that limit from $500,000 to $2 million, which on behalf of our clients are trying to advocate against, which will impact the cost of insurance to municipalities, which will ultimately impacts the taxpayer. There's another big piece of legislation that we're following on behalf of our municipalities that are trying to make, local governments compliant with OSHA. If you don't know, local governments are exempt from OSHA requirements. We still do safety stuff and things to prevent accidents within each municipality and authority. However, if you have to become OSHA compliant, it's an extremely different ball game, as many of you know, in the private sector, doing your logs, having your courses, your OSHA classes. So what we try to do, and what one of the things that folks don't recognize, it's a huge cost to municipalities, their insurance program, not just the health insurance program, but trying to protect the municipalities and their employees from litigation. And in Pennsylvania, it's just been extremely difficult. But there's different laws that protect police and fire when they get injured, called the Pennsylvania Heart and Lung Act. That's unique than workers' comp in the private sector. So all this is, I think, as you've heard, it's just very tough to manage. As Chip said, there's a lot that goes on within a municipality and an authority that you can't even really talk to your fellow elected officials about. But the insurance aspect of it is definitely another, not a humongous piece, but an important piece that helps protect the taxpayers or the ratepayers from potential litigation and losses. So on a high level, Paul, I hope that's enough and gives you a little understanding of some of the other things that we have to deal with at a local government level.
Thank you, Mike. Chip, I want to turn over to you, because you've been both a first-class commissioner and also a second-class supervisor. What are the most significant differences between the two township codes that we have, and also boroughs and cities, which really are more aligned with what first-class townships do?
Thanks for that question, Paul. Once again, as I said earlier, it depends on what type of township you are, how big you are. When I look at the work that we do in Lower Heidelberg compared to my experience in Qumru, they're very similar. Even though we're only a second-class township in Lower Heidelberg, we provide the same level of service, have similar challenges with police departments. There are some townships that don't have their own police department. They rely on state police coverage. So there are changes in the rules and things that allow you to provide a lower level of service. And EMS is another one where, as supervisors, you sometimes don't realize that it's your responsibility to provide some level of service and or have mutual aid agreements in place if you don't have those services provided through the township. once again, if you're the 3-person supervisor board versus a 5-person commission board, there's huge differences there. Part of the challenge is, once again, as we all know, trying to hire appropriate personnel. There are various differences in the managers that we have across the county. Some have been doing it for a long time, and some are very well skilled. There's other that are new managers, and sometimes, I think we struggle by not necessarily having the best team in some cases to do it. And that's the hopefully the focus of this call, the focus of the Center for Elections for Local Government. The things that we do at Albright is provide training. When anybody newly gets elected to any kind of position in the county, we provide a new board member training program, which I think is 6 or 7 different nights of coming together. We have solicitors come in, we have budget people come in. So we're constantly trying to make sure that the elected officials have at least a good starting point to provide direction to the townships and boroughs they serve. So that kind of answered it, Paul. I'm not sure what else you might be looking for, but that's kind of my answer at this point.
Well, one of the interesting things about second-class townships, and we talked about the fact that they're very, very rural, it's the one code that allows an elected official to serve as an employee of the municipality. And, when we talk about second-class townships that maybe have, 300 people, they have a hard time providing services. So what they do is they allow the supervisors to be roadmasters. But the second-class code is a permissive code as opposed to a required code. And that goes to the fact that it's mostly rural areas.
Even though that's allowed, Paul, I mean, I've been part of a situation where it was not the best practice, to be honest with you. So I know it's allowed, but let me just say that it's not something that I would support as an elected official. I think if you want to be an elected official, you should do that and try not to be part of the operation. I know it's difficult, but that's something that I would strongly discourage any township to consider, having an elected official being part of their employee group.
Absolutely. Okay, Fred, as we talked about earlier, annexation is not permitted in Pennsylvania, but you can merge 2 or more municipalities by a referendum where each municipality passes the referendum. You personally participated in a consolidation in Wyomissing. You want to talk a little bit about that and Berks's history of municipal mergers?
Well, it's not happened very often. I think there are, what is it, something like 16, Paul, is it? Mergers that have occurred all across Pennsylvania. We have like 4 of them here in Berks County, and really thanks to the Center for Excellence in Local Government has really led the way in a lot of making those things a reality. The borough of Wyomissing merged with the borough of West Reading in 2001, I think it was. And that started out, again, it's a matter of providing services and making those services affordable to our residents. There were some conversations that got started between Wyomissing and Wyomissing Hills in terms of Wyomissing taking over the police services on a contractual basis in Wyomissing Hills. As we went through some of those conversations, it was actually the mayor of Wyomissing Hills who said, why don't we just talk about putting the whole thing together? So we opened up the conversation to a larger thing. We had a series of public meetings to discuss the idea of merging the 2. We already were in the same school district, which simplified things to some degree. And it went to vote, and the vote was overwhelming. It was over 90% in the Hills and about 80% or so in Wyomissing Borough. So you'd have to get more than 50%. So it was an overwhelming thing. And it really has been pretty much seamless. So we've had a very good experience with it. The other mergers have been the borough of Temple going into Muhlenberg. So Mike was involved in that one. Spring Township merged with the former borough of West Lawn. Up in the northern part of the county, we had Strausstown Borough going into Topockin Township. So it was 4 4 instances out of the 16 in the state, and they all have proven successful. There is currently a conversation going on about Mount Penn Borough and Lower Alces Township that will be at some point heading toward a vote. They tried it once before, it was not approved. My gut reaction is that this time it will succeed, as it just becomes unaffordable to provide all the services that we're required to do. And having a larger tax base, it allows you to, when the inevitable tax increase comes, you can spread it out over more people and make it affordable for everybody.
Thanks, Fred. I think one of the things that we can take away from this discussion today is that it is very difficult to operate local government services with a declining tax base. Pennsylvania has, on 4 occasions in my career, which spans 40 years, 4 times they've tried to do tax reform. And all they ever did in each of the 4 cases was take away tax flexibility. And so we're still today working off the same basic tax code that was established in the 50s. So that creates a lot of problems. One of the questions that was asked in the chat was, given a declining population in Pennsylvania, how can many small boroughs continue to fund their own police, fire, sewage, and water? If you look at the map of Pennsylvania, and Chip, you as the past chairman for the Water and Sewer Association, I think you can speak to this. Most of the water and sewer services are focused either in cities or boroughs. That's where they provided those services. Townships, in most cases, don't have those services because they're rural. And even though they've grown since then, basically the townships that do have those services today get it because of adjacent boroughs. And so that's one area that's different with it. And of course, we talked about the boroughs, not being able to annex property. So they're basically locked in as of 1967, and they struggled with their tax code through the 80s into the 90s. And then the townships started to grow around them, and the townships ended up getting all kinds of additional taxes because of the development around them. But the boroughs in Pennsylvania really constricted their operations starting in the 80s and 90s. And so they've been dealing with this for a long, long time. A lot of boroughs contract services. In Pennsylvania, fire is mostly volunteer, and we talked about the fact that EMS services are done by nonprofits or by hospitals, except for the city of Reading. So a lot of those services are restricted by boroughs, but they are where the population centers are, and so they've had to struggle with how to provide those services. Chip, as the chairman of the Community Advisory Board, the center has been involved in a lot of regional stuff. And, I think that anybody that lives in Berks County should take pride in the fact that we have more regional services and we have more regional cooperation than anywhere in the Commonwealth. And that's factual. I mean, the county of Reading has a lot. I mean, the county of York has a lot of regional police departments. But here in Berks County, we have regional police, we have regional fire, we have regional codes, we have regional zoning. And so, I like to talk about the fact that I am at least half Pennsylvania Dutch. But I think that a lot of the mentality here in Berks County is Dutchy. And so if we can do it cheaper and provide as good a service, or if we can provide better service for the same cost, we're going to talk about it. And I'll tell you, that is not the case around Pennsylvania. Around Pennsylvania, man, they don't want to talk about it. Every municipality does it better than everybody else. So don't talk to me about cooperating. So Chip, you want to take that issue of intergovernmental cooperation and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you forgot fire. There's intergovernmental cooperation on fire. Certainly water and sewer is one, but also the sharing of emergency services on the public works side. So I know in a case where, a borough crew could be busy picking leaves or plowing snow. If there's a water main break, typically the same crew would go ahead and try to repair the water main break. But in areas around the suburbs, intergovernmental cooperations involving the city area, Reading Area Water Authority, we are providing emergency backup repairs for things like water main breaks. Sharing of equipment. It could be a generator. It could be a snow plow if a plow is broken. So all of that stuff is occurring, and I would think that you're seeing more and more of those cooperation agreements. I can tell you the most recent opportunity, I think there are 5 or 6 municipalities, including West Reading, Wyomissing, Lower Heidelberg, all talking about GIS sharing. So we're coming together to capture GIS information and then sharing that all together. So the field is really prime for any kind of development there. The other thing I just want to take a quick moment, Paul, and talk about a little bit about water and sewer. You're going to see a very, very active water and sewer regulation situation happen in the next couple of years. We're forced with lead and copper rules. We've got to provide a survey of every single household we serve to EPA and DEP, determining whether we know or don't know what type of service line is feeding that house. You also have PFAS, which is an emergent contaminant that is the forever chemical. You're talking about absolutely no questions asked, doubling rates on the water and sewer side in the next 5 years because of these increased government regulations. So if you're not paying attention to water and sewer, please pay attention. If you're an elected official or a consumer of these items, we're being forced through government regulations to majorly take a look at our treatment processes. And what we're going to be adding to that is going to be a huge impact on all the residents of the county.
If you don't mind my jumping in here and talk about inter-county cooperation, a number of years ago, BARDA and Red Rose out of Lancaster were successful in merging mass transit authorities. So it's certainly doable on a larger scale. And we're presently working with Dauphin County and Lehigh County to reopen our existing youth detention center, which was shuttered about 12 years ago. We're working with 2 other counties to pull together the resources to open this up for what has become over the last dozen years or so, a significant increase in violent crime with juveniles. A lot of gun crimes are occurring in those 3 large counties, and working together over the next year and a half, we hope to open a regional youth detention center in Bern Township to serve 3 counties. So there is a possibility out there, but you really have to work hard at it. Thank you.
Excellent. Dave, we've reached the end of the formal program. You had a couple of questions, but I also wanted to check back with you to see timing wise, where are we at in terms of progressing the discussion here?
Yeah, I think we've got about 20 minutes or so left, Paul, so we can go through that. I want to have a couple questions. I want to build one off of the question that you read from the chat function. And that is, what impact are demographic changes having on the ability of our county, our local governments to address the challenges and issues that they're facing? You've got instances of aging population. You've got instances of some communities are facing significant declines in population. The demographic characteristics of the population are changing. What impact do they have on the services, the programs, the resources you have to be able to address the things you do?
It's a great question. It's a static, and I'll turn it over to everybody. I mean, the Commonwealth just does not progress how it manages local governments. We're frozen in time. The biggest tax reform and the biggest reform that the state did for local governments in Pennsylvania was when they took a $10 per capita tax and allowed it to be a $52 local services tax. So they quadrupled the amount of money, and they said, oh, look at this. We did this by 500%, but it's still only $52 per person for where they work as opposed to where they live. And then it became, well, people can't afford to pay that $52 at one time. So then they started making it be deducted from paychecks. So, that's the biggest piece of tax reform we have. Fred talked about the mercantile tax. Well, one of those times when they wanted to redo local government, they removed mercantile and business privilege tax from local government charges. And if you didn't have it in place, you don't get it. So some of those boroughs that probably could get some pretty good revenue off of business privilege or mercantile didn't have it in place when they did that, and now they can't get it. So there is no new taxes for the county. There's no new taxes for first class or second class townships. So that's part of the problem that we have. And it's the same thing for school districts. And tax reform would be great, but we just run into problems.
I missed it. Yeah, I missed that. I was in another meeting.
To being able to manage the
I just let everybody know, like, We as
Excuse
a
me, could
planning
you,
officer on.
could you
we
mute your
are aware
microphone,
of all
please?
of these things going on.
Andrew,
And
your
we're
microphone is off.
conduit to kind of make connections
Could
as
you
much
mute
as
your
we can.
microphone?
Yeah.
But we also, like everybody says, we're at capacity. I can't just.
Whoever is the host should be
I
able to
can't just go
manually
and
put
say,
them
yeah,
on
I'm
their,
gonna take up
on their
using the
image.
single track trails that.
Okay, sorry.
David, your earlier question about the aging population, the impact on the county is significant. We've had record numbers of elder abuse cases coming through our area agency on aging. Mental health is through the roof with folks with conditions. Even Veterans Affairs is seeing a marked increase in claimants in the aging population. So, and again, the HIME. We see that day in and day out. We see a trend going in that direction where more and more services are needed by the aging population here in Berks County.
The other thing I'll mention too is the Imagine Berks initiative that David Hunter and the County Planning Commission has led was very informative from the perspective of there are certain school districts that have capacity. There's other school districts that are dying and need in a big way to build additional schools. So one of the things the Imagine Berks initiative did was it looked at water and sewer and utilities, but it also looked at the townships and the boroughs of where do they want to see the development to occur. There's some people that don't want to see any development at all. There's some people that want to see, in our case, in Lower Heidelberg, we have plenty of residential development. We don't have enough commercial development. And I think the key from the Imagine Berks initiative from the county is the townships and the boroughs need to decide that, but they should be an informed decision. And the fact that you've got some districts right next to each other where one needs capacity, one has plenty of capacity is a perfect example of what type of development that town or that school district might like to see in their district versus a district right next door. So that's another, talking about how things are changing, demographics are changing. It also comes back to housing starts and where the houses are being built and where the commercial development is. And I'll tell you, we also have plenty of water capacity in the county. That's the one thing I'll tell you. Sewer capacity is a different story. Sewer capacity is certainly centered around the city of Reading and other plants, but water capacity is abundant. But once again, you have to have water lines in the ground. We have developments that occur up on I-78, the warehouses, they're putting their own individual water systems in just for that development. But once again, in general, we have plenty of capacity for water in the county.
Chip, I think it's important to say we have plenty of capacity for good water. And that's something that around the country is a problem right now. And we hear about it all the time.
But, Paul, do you have any idea what percentage of the population of Berks County has access to public water supplies versus other alternatives?
Yes, I have that study. I don't have
There
that
you
on
go,
top
Chip.
of, yeah, we've done all that work.
Okay.
I believe almost 80% of the population of the county is served by public water. But the problem is when you think about the number of people versus the geographical area, a lot of the northern part of the county, other than pockets like Hamburg, things like that, where there's a borough there that has their own water system. There's a lot of townships that have no water service at all, no sewer service. They're on-site wells, on-site septics. But in general, where the population is, we're doing a pretty good job of supplying them with public water and sewer.
Okay, another question sort of related to that, because we've heard about water and sewer and roads. But there's a lot of money that's been made available by the federal and state government for broadband and internet service. Thank you, Kevin Barnard. When you were a commissioner, you voted for the county to put some money on the table. How important of an issue is this? Does it rise to the level of water and sewer, roads?
Well, in terms of economic development, it's critical. So yeah, we can argue that there are certain single family homes out there that don't get cable and they're still using dial-up service. I know that there's a couple of projects occurring in Berks County that is really going to target the rural areas. But in terms of being able to provide economic development and cite companies, if you don't have basic cable available, you're not going to get economic development. They're just not going to go in that area. And, there isn't a place in Berks County that doesn't have access to serious population because we have 500,000, we have almost 500,000 people live in a county, but there are plenty of places elsewhere in Pennsylvania where you don't have high-speed internet, but you also don't have population. And so If we had internet available, high-speed internet available across the county, we could open up a lot of area for economic development, which would be huge. We can't do it. We also struggle with power, electric.
Yep, I think,
That's another area.
yeah, David, I think they all tie together with economic development is the water, the sewer, the internet, as well as roads. It all ties together with quality of life and how you want an economic boom here in Berks County. And electric too, that there's a significant shortage throughout areas of the county for power.
Yeah.
David,
Okay.
the only thing I just add real quickly that
Sure.
we're talking about in Muhlenberg Township, we're almost in a redevelopment mode. We're pretty much built out. So everything we try to do, economic development at sites, brownfields, not to get into all that, but our problem, let's be honest, in Berks County, our school taxes are killing us. They're killing economic development no matter what else we do. It's just hard to entice companies to go in and invest in areas when the school taxes are so high. Because we deal with it because they'll just walk down to another county or another state when you're trying to attract, major manufacturing in. And I'm not picking on the school boards. I'm not picking on, that, but we've been buying up property in Muhlenberg Township just to avoid, 15 townhomes going in because assessment values, Kevin, you know better than me, aren't growing at the rate they used to grow at in Berks County, which is where we get the majority of our funding. And the majority of companies, the larger ones, are filing for reassessment, which when they get granted for that significantly impacts our funding far more on a percentage wise than it does to probably the district. So what we really need to do, and I hope that our state really takes some consideration. I don't know the answer, obviously, but when you talk to developers or someone just Googles your local community, the first thing they're going to do, first look at the availability of water and sewer and some of those other infrastructure items, but they're going to look at your taxes and they're going to go right to that school tax area, no matter how much we all work together. And the county's been great. We've issued, we partner with them on a LERTA program. You can Google that and hear what that's all about. But if we don't have some long-term fix for housing and for our school property taxes, it's going to be really hard, as you all know that are business owners, to attract people to expand and grow because it becomes very cost prohibitive as much as we can do from a local government perspective.
Yeah,
so I'll get off my soapbox, Kevin, too.
Yeah.
How's that?
Mike hit the nail on the head. Our assessed value is anemic and our appeals are enormous. It just seems to be the trend over the last couple of years. So we're struggling. And then that impacts the school districts and it impacts the municipalities.
So that dependence on property taxes is a really significant challenge.
Bingo.
If the state were to provide more money for school funding, would that be a significant thing to try to reduce some of the property taxes?
You mean live up to their obligation from the state constitution, that one?
The one about 50% of the funding coming from the state, yeah.
And the
Minor technicality.
The one that requires them to fund the court system, that one too? Sorry. They push down and say, we didn't raise taxes. They push it down to local government. They slam us with it. Here's an example. 12 years ago, there was a budget impasse for like 100 and some days. They sliced 10% of our mental health funding out of the budget, never restored it. So think about a 10% reduction. And over the last 12 or 13 years, cost of living adjustments, we're probably 40% behind on where we should be with mental health funding. Just one item. And we didn't raise any taxes at the state level. Blame your school district, blame your municipality, blame your county for tax increases. There's no state lawmakers on the call. If not, call my extension. We can have a further discussion.
We have a question in the comment section about what challenges do local governments, municipalities have in communicating with their residents and trying to be transparent. And the other side of that one is how effective are you in terms of communicating to your residents about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it? Anybody want to weigh in?
That's a huge challenge. We've now tried to have a Facebook presence, a social media presence. We do a newsletter now. We're trying to deliver that electronically. But the problem is it's very, very difficult to reach the residents. you have a water and sewer bill that goes out, so there's another opportunity there. But you try to do the best you can, but people are always saying they're not hearing it. We recently installed electronic sign out in front of the township building. So it is a challenge, and you got to keep working at it. And we try to do the best we can.
One of the problems is that the Reading Eagle is not there to cover municipal and school board meetings anymore, as they used to. There is an effort to spotlight PA. Heather Adams, I think, was on the call. I don't know if she's still there. She is the executive director of BCTV and has been a participant in establishing what will be a Berks bureau. So hopefully there'll be some hope on the horizon. But at this point in time, I can't tell you the last time there was a reporter from the Reading Eagle that showed up at one of our borough council meetings.
Okay, and this is a question, Fred, I'm going to start with you. What impact will bringing the trains back have on your community?
Well, I think the passenger train between Reading and Philadelphia is a great thing. I've been following it closely, and the county commissioners have done a good job. I believe that it will be in place probably take about another 5 or so years. It's been a long battle to get it to this point, but I think it's close. In my opinion, the trains ought to not stop in downtown Reading, but swing around over to Warmminster. But that's a topic for another meeting, Dave.
Had to give you a chance to say that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is it going to affect any of the other communities? Kevin, obviously it's going to affect the county, but.
Oh, certainly, but obviously front and center with this a number of years with Chester, Montgomery, and Berks County. And I think the impetus for this is really was driven by Berks County for the most part. The chair of the Schuylkill River Passenger Rail Authority is our chair of the board, Commissioner Leinbach. So there's a vested interest in this. We've been funding it. The implementation, things like, I think the $500,000 in the budget to move this thing forward. So the county's all in with rail service. And I think it's a huge economic driver for not just the terminus in the city of Reading, but for miles around, really, to bring in economic development. All the studies have indicated when you have rail service, things go through the roof with respect to economic development, and we need that big time.
Mike and Chip, anything you want to say?
Yeah, David, if it can cut down my 3.5-hour ride back from the Eagles Monday night game, I'm all for it. How's that? Then I'm in. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's working. We have offices across the Commonwealth, and it's nice, from Lancaster to Philadelphia, or to meet someone from New York in Philadelphia. It's a tremendous benefit for being able to collaborate across the region than just even in between Philadelphia and Reading. I mean, you get to Philadelphia, it creates a lot of other options. The DC, I think it will open up so much more than we always just think getting to Philadelphia. But the whole Mid-Atlantic will open up then for a lot of our businesses. So I think that's an important factor also people sometimes forget about.
Hey, here's my soapbox agenda. We really need volunteers to help us with local government. We struggle to find people to serve on water, sewer authorities. We struggle for zoning board members, planning commission members. We struggle sometimes with elected officials that seem to have an agenda and want to get elected because they got a single item that they have a problem with. So we really need higher quality, business-like minded people to get involved in local politics. I know it's a commitment. I know certain people like to do it. Other people just like to bitch. But I'm telling you, there's a strong need for people to really take this call and say, hey, listen, it starts at the local government level, and we need help at all different levels, whether it's in a volunteer position, it could be the rec board, all the way up to running for public office. But we need good quality people.
It's a time commitment, but it's well worth the time invested. I agree with Chip 100%.
Yeah, thank you, Chip, because that's a good segue to one of the questions that we have in the chat function, which is, how do people find out about these opportunities? How do they find out about running for office? How do they find out about the boards and commissions and opportunities you have?
Great
And-
question. Your township managers, your borough managers are the go-to people. They're the ones that are the quarterback of the municipality. And if you go to a meeting or make a phone call and say, hey, I'm interested in providing, some public service, what does that look like? I would strongly encourage people to participate in their township meetings, and their borough meetings. We typically get a lot of people showing up, and typically they're there to complain about something. But it's also inspiring to see people are showing up because they just want to be informed, understand, what's happening. So there's hot button topics that we all know about, warehouses and things like that. There's not in my backyard type of things that are occurring. And some of that stuff might make sense for a small group of individuals. But from a township or borough perspective, it's all about holding taxes to the point where we can provide the services. If we don't have development, we can't increase the tax base. That means your taxes are going to go up without the development. That's a counterproductive movement that really is not in everybody's best interest.
And sort of related to that, and this is probably a question for Paul, is there, if I wanted to run for office, is there a place I could go to learn about the nature of the office, about what's expected of a person who serves in those offices before the election? So I know what I'm getting into. Paul, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So the Center for Excellence in Local Government really works with individuals that are elected. This is a great question because, how do you learn about what's the responsibility? And I can't tell you how many times we run our newly elected officials class and we get people who attend the class and they go to their first meeting and they have no idea that that's what their job is all about. But we try not, I can talk to people about what it is to be a local elected official. I think any elected official in any of the municipalities would be happy to talk with a resident about what the job of being an elected official is. But the center itself, a lot of times we get asked to help with a forum to work with people who might want to run for office, but our job is to support our elected officials that are actually in office. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in looking at local government to talk to their own local officials, or like Chip said, talk to your manager or your secretary. That's one of the anomalies about Pennsylvania. A municipal secretary, people look at that and go, well, she takes shorthand or he does filing. A municipal secretary is just like a corporate secretary. They have all the formal legal responsibilities of filing things on behalf of the municipality. It's not the secretary like we used to call people. So the secretary or secretary treasurer or the manager is the person to talk to about that. But like Chip said, show up at a meeting and show interest in it, and you'll generate discussion, and that can help you to understand whether you feel like that's something you want to be involved in or not. It is amazing that the impact that local government has on persons' lives, people just don't recognize that impact. And it's like I said, you look at the federal government, you look at the local government, people, when they leave their house, they're in local government. When they flush their toilet, it's everything we have in Pennsylvania as opposed to other parts of the county or parts of the country. So local government is really where it's happening. So I'm sorry, get off my soapbox there.
That's okay. The four of our panelists, and Paul, you as well, have a lot of experience working in local government. Like maybe the five of you have close to 100 years worth of doing this. Has it been rewarding? Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
In a heartbeat. I have to laugh. I shouldn't say this. When I was asked for an appointment on West Reading Borough Council in December of 1982, I was convinced that it's only one meeting a month. But I got so in love with it and then got involved in Main Street. I was up at Borough Hall several times a week, but it was like my recreation. It was like my hobby. I didn't learn to golf till I was 40, but I just got so in love with it because you were giving back to your local community. So if anyone wants to say, I want to give back to my local community, as Chip pointed out, start small, start on a board and work your way up. It's really great. No regrets whatsoever.
I used to joke, I don't know how many people know that local government officials, when I say local government, not the county, but local government officials, if you're a supervisor or a commissioner, you're paid like minimum wage doesn't apply to you. You're
Yes.
paid pennies on the hour of work that you do, but it's people who want to make a difference. And, you know, when I was a manager, I wanted to go into the office every day. And when I walk out at the end of the day, look at it and say, wow, what was it I did that made people's lives a little bit better? Because local government really has that opportunity to really impact the lives of people where they serve. So I think it's great. But remember that when you talk to your elected official, if you try to sit there and say, you know, I pay you, you have like 7 seconds and then you've paid them their entire salary for that particular year. So make it a quick statement if you feel like you're paying for their salary.
Great. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Paul, for arranging this. Thank you for doing this. It's been a really good and informative session. As I told you, we're going to put the recording out to everybody who registered for the event. We will share it with BCTV and put it on the Berks Alliance website. Good stuff. Very, very helpful. Just what we were looking for in doing this. So thank you all. And we will see you sometime soon again.
Thank you.
David, thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Work, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.